What begins as a family reckoning quickly turns into something far darker, more humiliating, and more psychologically violent than anyone in Genoa City was prepared to witness. The truth does not arrive like a clean confession or a moment of redemption. It arrives like a weapon, calculated, preserved, sharpened in silence, then driven straight into the heart of a family that has already spent years surviving on fragile versions of loyalty. And in a world like the young and the restless, where bloodlines carry power, legitimacy, inheritance, and emotional identity all at once, the destruction of a paternity story is never just a private wound. It becomes a public execution of trust. Holden does not merely defend himself against suspicion. He tears the foundation out from under everyone in the room and forces them to stare at the ruins. For Stephanie, that moment is not simply exposure. It is the collapse of a carefully maintained mythology. For Malcolm, it is the kind of pain that does not bleed on the outside but still leaves a man feeling as though his entire past has been desecrated. And for Holden, the revelation is not an impulsive act of anger. It is the final stage of a plan he has been building for 2 long years. A campaign not just to uncover the truth, but to make the people who shaped his life feel the weight of every stolen year. The most devastating part of Holden's reveal is not even the secret video itself, though that alone is enough to freeze the air in the room and turn a confrontation into a war. It is the cold discipline behind it. He has not come unprepared. He has not wandered into this family by accident, driven by curiosity or a passing suspicion. He has studied them. He has followed their patterns, their emotional weak points, their old scandals, their habits of denial, and the way privileged families bury sins beneath polished appearances. For 2 years he has moved through shadows, collecting fragments that never quite fit until one day they did. A suspicious payment, an altered medical trail, a doctor willing to bend truth for money, dates that never aligned as cleanly as Stephanie insisted, reactions that carried too much fear for innocence. Holden did not simply investigate a lie. He built a case against the emotional architecture of an entire family. By the time he steps forward with proof, he is no longer a confused outsider seeking identity. He is a man who has turned grief into discipline and abandonment into strategy. That is what makes him so dangerous. Anger in Genoa City is common. Revenge is practically a language of its own. But Holden's anger is not theatrical. It does not waste itself in noise. It has matured into something colder, something more methodical, almost surgical in the way it cuts people where they are most fragile. He knows Stephanie's terror is not only about being exposed as a liar, it is about losing control over the story she has enforced for years. She has lived too long believing that truth is something powerful people can rearrange if they act quickly enough, cry convincingly enough, or bury enough evidence under the right kind of influence. She counted on confusion. She counted on loyalty. Most of all, she counted on time. She believed that once enough years had passed, even a lie this monstrous could harden into reality. Holden's existence alone threatened that illusion, but his evidence destroys it completely. The moment he reveals that she once paid a doctor to falsify an ADN record, the room stops being a room and becomes a courtroom of memory, shame, and moral collapse. Stephanie's panic is immediate because on some level, she has been expecting this reckoning for years. There are people who lie once and then spend the rest of their lives trying not to look back. Stephanie is more complex and more tragic than that. She lied, then lived inside the lie so long that she began to depend on it emotionally. That dependence became a kind of private addiction. She needed the false story not only to protect herself but to justify every cruel choice that followed. If the lie remained intact, then the manipulation had meaning. If the lie fell apart, then she would have to face something unbearable. That she did not protect a family, she poisoned one. Her desperation when Holden corners her is not the fear of a villain caught too late. It is the fear of a woman realizing that the one thing she built her life around may expose her as the architect of her own ruin. Her instinct is to beg for silence, because silence has always been her strongest accomplice. But silence no longer belongs to her. Malcolm's collapse is the emotional center of the tragedy, because his pain is not rooted in ambition or ego. It is rooted in the most intimate and devastating form of masculine vulnerability. The belief that love and instinct should have been enough to protect him from deception. He has carried a certainty inside himself that defied logic, doubt, and even evidence. He believed because he felt. He trusted because he loved. And when a man like Malcolm discovers that the emotional truth he held onto may have been manipulated from the very beginning, the wound cuts deeper than humiliation. It attacks his sense of self. He is not only forced to question Stephanie, he is forced to question his own memory, his own instincts, his own fatherly attachment, his own right to claim a bond that may have been engineered as part of a fraud. Yet what makes Malcolm heartbreaking rather than weak is that even in collapse, he does not surrender his emotional truth easily. Some part of him still clings to the feeling that the boy is his son, because feelings do not vanish the moment facts become contaminated. That conflict tears him apart from the inside. The mind begins to reject what the heart still insists upon, and in that fracture, Malcolm becomes a man at war with himself. There is something especially cruel about false paternity in a family like the Winters family, where legacy is not just material but spiritual. It means belonging. It means history. It means being shaped by values, by sacrifices, by pain passed from one generation to the next. So when Holden tears into Stephanie's deception, he is not only exposing a medical fraud, he is reopening every old fear about who gets to belong, who gets erased, and who gets rewritten to serve someone else's agenda. In another family, this might be handled as a legal crisis. Here, it becomes an emotional inheritance dispute. Malcolm's anguish, Lily's disbelief, Devon's fury, the wider family's confusion, all of it grows from the same poisoned root. Someone tried to manufacture identity as if blood, memory, and emotional truth were just ingredients in a scheme. And that is where Holden's character becomes most complicated. He is not innocent, not in the pure sense. By the time he reveals his 2-year investigation, he has crossed lines of his own. He has watched people without their knowledge. He has embedded himself in situations under false pretenses. He has withheld information until the moment it could cause maximum destruction. There is a darkness in that choice, and the story becomes far richer because of it. Holden is not a victim who walks cleanly into justice. He is a damaged man who has begun to resemble the very world that damaged him. The difference is that he knows it. That self-awareness makes him more unnerving than a straightforward villain. He does not believe he is good anymore. He believes he is necessary. He believes exposure is the only form of justice left when institutions, money, and family loyalty have all been corrupted. Once a person reaches that point, they stop caring whether truth arrives gently. They care only that it arrives with enough force to leave scars. His fixation on Stephanie is especially revealing. He does not simply want her cornered. He wants her to feel history turning against her. For 2 years, he has likely imagined this confrontation in countless forms. But reality surpasses fantasy because Stephanie's fear confirms everything he suspected. Her face, her panic, the way she pleads rather than fights back, all of it becomes emotional evidence. And when Holden makes it clear that she did not just lie but stole his life, the accusation carries more weight than any DNA report ever could. It reframes the entire story. This is no longer just about whether Malcolm was deceived. It is about whether Holden's very identity was engineered through a selfish act of control. If Stephanie altered records, manipulated fathers, and shaped a child's destiny through fraud, then Holden is living proof of the damage powerful lies inflict over time. He is not only uncovering a secret, he is standing there as the consequence of it. Stephanie's motives, however, should not be reduced to simple greed or cruelty. The story grows more powerful if her deception came from a toxic combination of fear, desperation, pride, and obsession with control. Perhaps she believed that once the false record was in place, she could secure stability, affection, status, or protection. Perhaps she thought she was fixing a situation that threatened to destroy her. That is the lie many desperate people tell themselves before they do something unforgivable. That manipulation is temporary, that the truth can be managed later, that the emotional costs can be cleaned up once the crisis has passed. But years pass, loyalties deepen, children grow, identities form, and then the original sin mutates into an entire life built on distortion. Stephanie is not frightening because she lied once. She is frightening because she kept choosing the lie every day afterward. She fed it. She protected it. She let other people love under false conditions. That is what makes her panic now feel deserved, even as it remains painfully human. The fallout across Genoa City would be immediate and vicious. Families there do not simply process scandal, they weaponize it. Secrets migrate fast. Sympathy splinters. Old rivals smell weakness. The revelation about the fake ADN record would ripple far beyond the original confrontation, because it would touch too many nerves at once. Medical corruption, paternity fraud, manipulation of inheritance, emotional abuse, and the moral hypocrisy of families that lecture others about loyalty while hiding their own rot. Some would rally behind Malcolm out of genuine compassion. Others would circle the story because power vacuums always invite opportunists. There would be legal consequences looming in the background, but the greater threat would be emotional fragmentation. Once a family begins questioning who knew what and when, every silence becomes suspicious. Every act of protection starts to look like complicity. Lily would be particularly volatile in a story like this because she understands better than most what it means to live under the pressure of family image while carrying private resentment. A betrayal of this magnitude would not just disgust her, it would offend her sense of order. She would see immediately that the damage extends beyond Malcolm and Holden. It contaminates the family's moral center. And because Lily has always had a fierce instinct for control under pressure, her anger would likely harden into action. She would want names, timelines, accountability, and she would not be satisfied with tears from Stephanie or confusion from Malcolm. She would demand precision because precision is the only thing that can fight chaos. Yet beneath that cold determination, there would be fear. Fear that the family she has defended so often has been more fragile than she wanted to believe. Fear that love can be manipulated so thoroughly that even the strongest people end up living inside someone else's fiction. Devon, too, would respond from a different but equally dangerous emotional place. His anger would be more primal, less controlled, driven by the instinct to protect his family and punish anyone who violated it. Devon has always been at his most compelling when his composure slips and the depth of his loyalty becomes almost destructive. In this kind of storyline, he would not be able to tolerate Stephanie's excuses or Holden's manipulations for long. He would understand Holden's pain, but he would also resent the calculated way Holden detonated the truth. Devon would see collateral damage immediately. He would see Malcolm unraveling. He would see the family destabilizing. And he would likely ask the hardest question of all. If Holden truly wanted justice, why stage this like an ambush? That question matters because it exposes the moral grayness at the center of the storyline. Holden may be right, but he is not gentle. He may be justified, but he is not clean. And in Genoa City, people rarely forgive being turned into spectators at their own emotional execution. The doctor at the center of the falsified record becomes another crucial piece of the puzzle because that person represents the system that enabled Stephanie's deception. One corrupt act by a desperate woman is terrible enough, but a professional willing to alter identity through medicine for money turns a private lie into institutional violence. Holden's possession of the secret video suggests he has dug deep enough to understand that truth in this world is often not hidden by one person alone. It is protected by networks of fear, greed, and convenience. The doctor may have thought the matter was buried, another discreet favor sold to someone with enough money or influence. But once Holden has evidence, that old corruption becomes a live wire again. Suddenly, the past is not buried. It is prosecutable. The problem for everyone involved is that the law may not move as fast as pain does. Emotional consequences will hit long before any courtroom does. One of the darkest possibilities in this story is that Holden's investigation was never just about discovering whether Malcolm was his father. It may also have been about deciding whether this family deserved to survive the truth. That is where the 2-year timeline becomes chilling. 2 years is long enough not just to gather evidence, but to develop judgment, resentment, strategy, and perhaps even temptation. Did Holden ever consider approaching Malcolm privately? Did he ever think about exposing Stephanie quietly? Or did he come to believe that this family was too practiced in concealment to ever face truth unless he shattered them publicly? The answer changes everything about him. If he chose spectacle because he wanted them to suffer, then pain has already remade him. If he chose it because he believed private mercy would only invite another cover-up, then he becomes a tragic avenger rather than a monster. The best version of this storyline leaves that line deliberately blurred. Malcolm's internal struggle after the exposure would be devastating to watch because it would not resolve quickly. He would swing between denial, grief, rage, guilt, and something even more corrosive, shame at having been manipulated so deeply. Men like Malcolm often believed that love should make them wiser, not more vulnerable. Realizing that his heart may have been used against him would produce a kind of quiet humiliation that he would hate admitting aloud. Yet even more painful would be his continued attachment to Holden. If a man has spent years feeling fatherhood in his bones, the collapse of paperwork does not erase the emotional bond overnight. Malcolm may begin to suspect the science was manipulated, the records were false, the past was staged, but he still cannot easily extinguish what he felt every time he looked at Holden. That tension would make him erratic, sleepless, emotionally unpredictable. It could even push him into reckless attempts to prove the truth for himself, to hunt for new tests, new witnesses, new forgotten details that might restore certainty. Because uncertainty is its own torture. At least a clean loss lets grief begin. Ambiguity traps a man inside the wound. Stephanie, meanwhile, would become increasingly unstable as control slips away from her. Exposure has a strange effect on people who have lied for years. At first it makes them defensive, frantic, desperate to patch holes. But once they realize the structure is beyond saving, a different kind of instability emerges. Resentment toward the people, forcing them to face what they did. Stephanie might begin by pleading, then shift into justification, then finally into rage. She would rewrite motives, paint herself as cornered, accuse others of misunderstanding sacrifices they never had to make. And somewhere in that unraveling, the audience would glimpse a terrifying possibility that she no longer fully remembers where the lie ended and her self-delusion began. Her greatest fear is not prison or disgrace. It is becoming small. Becoming the villain of a story she once controlled. For someone like Stephanie, that kind of humiliation can breed dangerous behavior. She may lash out, destroy evidence, target Holden's credibility, manipulate Malcolm's emotions one last time, or reveal other secrets in a final attempt to make sure she does not go down alone. That is where the story becomes a true conspiracy thriller instead of a simple paternity scandal. Once Stephanie is exposed, she becomes unpredictable. And unpredictable people are often most dangerous when they believe they have nothing left to lose. If Holden has been investigating the family for 2 years, he may know more than he has revealed. He may have copies of documents, financial trails, records of hush payments, or even evidence implicating others who helped Stephanie preserve the lie. Those people, once threatened, would not remain passive. The conspiracy could widen. Someone could begin following Holden. Malcolm's emotional breakdown could leave him vulnerable to manipulation. The family home could turn from a place of gathering into a battlefield of suspicion, where every visitor, phone call, and missing file feels ominous. In a city built on old grudges and power games, the truth never arrives alone. It drags other secrets behind it. The emotional irony at the heart of this entire storyline is brutal. Holden came searching for identity, and ended up becoming an instrument of destruction. Malcolm wanted to love and may have been deceived into loving under false circumstances. Stephanie wanted control, and now faces annihilation through the very truth she buried. No one wins cleanly. Even justice tastes bitter, because it arrives too late to restore what was stolen. Holden cannot get back the years shaped by uncertainty. Malcolm cannot recover the innocence of his belief. Stephanie cannot undo the choices that turned her fear into a life-altering fraud. That is what makes the story feel worthy of the young and the restless at its darkest. Every revelation answers one question, only to poison 5 others. And perhaps the most haunting development of all would come after the initial explosion, when the house is quiet, the accusations have been made, and each person is left alone with what remains. Holden, having finally exposed the lie, may discover that revenge does not produce peace. It produces emptiness, and in that emptiness, he must confront the possibility that he has defined himself for too long by the pursuit of truth, and not enough by the life he wants after it. Malcolm may sit with photographs, memories, and old instincts that no longer align cleanly with the facts, realizing that fatherhood can be both real and manipulated at once. Stephanie may find herself abandoned not only by the people she lied to, but by the narrative she once used to survive. That is the true punishment in stories like this. Not just disgrace, but the unbearable silence after control is gone. From there, the story could push into even darker territory. Malcolm, desperate to reclaim certainty, could reopen old timelines and discover another hidden layer, that Stephanie's original fraud may have been connected to a larger family power play involving inheritance, jealousy, or an old rivalry that was never truly resolved. Holden could uncover that he himself was watched long before he began watching them, suggesting someone else knew pieces of the truth and chose silence. Lily and Devon could fracture over how much compassion Holden deserves after orchestrating such a devastating exposure. And Stephanie, cornered from every side, could make one final terrible decision, either to confess everything and destroy others with her, or to disappear before justice can fully touch her, leaving behind a letter, a financial record, or one last poisonous clue that proves the lie was even bigger than anyone imagined. That would be the perfect final turn for a story built on hidden motives and emotional warfare. Because a secret this massive should never end with one exposure. It should leave smoke everywhere. It should stain future relationships, infect future alliances, and make everyone who survived it slightly less innocent than before. Holden should not walk away untouched. Malcolm should not heal quickly. Stephanie should not collapse into a simple caricature. The aftermath should feel like a long bruise spreading through the winter's orbit, reminding everyone that identity is fragile when the people entrusted with truth decide they would rather control love than honor it. In the end, the real tragedy is not merely that Stephanie may have falsified an ADN record or that Malcolm may have been deceived for years. The real tragedy is that love was present in this story, and still was not enough to prevent cruelty. Malcolm's love was real. Holden's hunger for truth was real. Even Stephanie's fear, however twisted, was real. But when fear takes command and power replaces honesty, real feelings do not save people. They become the raw material of manipulation. And that is why this storyline has the power to be so explosive. It is not just about who fathered whom. It is about what happens when a family's need to preserve itself becomes so consuming that it starts manufacturing reality. It is about the violence of stolen identity. It is about revenge that feels righteous until it begins to resemble obsession. It is about the unbearable cost of being loved inside a lie. What remains after that is not resolution, but open war. Holden has lit the match. Malcolm stands in the ashes of belief. Stephanie, stripped of control, becomes more dangerous precisely because she has been exposed. And the family, forced to reckon with what was done in its name, can no longer pretend that blood alone makes people honest. In Genoa City, truth rarely heals before it destroys. Here, it does what it always does best. It turns love into evidence, family into territory, memory into accusation, and one man's search for his place in the world into an all-consuming battle that leaves no heart unscarred.